Yo, what is up, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of NBA Now. Now, I know it has been a couple weeks, but we are going to get right into things here today. So, today, we are talking about the Cleveland Cavaliers. I think the Cleveland Cavaliers are one of the most interesting teams to talk about at this point in the NBA season. Obviously, kind of the miracle story of the Eastern Conference, and if not the whole NBA at this point. This is a team that last year was not very good. Coming into the year was not looked at as a playoff team, and definitely not a high-seeded playoff team. But they've kind of been exactly that. They've been a high-tier playoff team at this point in the Eastern Conference, and when you look at the standings so far, it's a team that's fourth. They're fourth in the Eastern Conference right now. They're above teams like Philadelphia. They're above teams like Boston. They're above teams like Brooklyn, Atlanta, New York. I mean, these are all playoff teams last year, and all teams that we have expectations for. New York isn't even in the play-in game, right? But Cleveland is up there at 35-23, a very, very positive record. And a lot of that is due to how they started off. We've seen a progression from Darius Garland, who has recently been selected an All-Star in Cleveland, funnily enough. So what a year for Cleveland to actually do something without LeBron for the first time in, well, my life. They host All-Star game. They're going to be a playoff team. They've got two All-Stars as Jared Allen replaces James Harden in the All-Star game as well. And this probably couldn't be a better year for them. The big thing that happened over the last week or two is Caris LeVert being moved to the team for Ricky Rubio. But real quick, I want to touch on Ricky Rubio. Ricky Rubio did a lot for this team. And he kind of, I think, was able to show what having a guard out there that wasn't Colin Sexton next to Darius Garland can do for your team. And he was so effective next to Darius Garland due to his ability to actually create his own shot and not be a kind of complete liability on defense, but also able to be, play make for others and stuff like that. And so because he was able to show that, I think not only was he decent enough with them that they were able to, move his contract to be able to go get a decent guy on a team like the Pacers that were selling some of their players. But also he was able to kind of teach this team some culture, right? Now, Kevin Love is obviously a proven winner, proven champion. He's been there. He's done that. And Ricky Rubio comparatively hasn't really, but he's a longtime veteran in the NBA, and he came into this team and I think did a lot for them. I think prior to the season starting, he was in that trade for Taurean Prince. Honestly, it looked like a win-win trade for both teams. Ricky Rubio able to come be a veteran mentor for the guys over in Cleveland, and then Taurean Prince able to go help the wing depth over in Minnesota. So far, it's looked so good for both teams, as Patrick Beverley has been the backup point guard that the Timberwolves wanted, and obviously we just saw him get recently extended there, and then Taurean Prince has been there for them as well. But then Ricky Rubio was such an instrumental part to what Cleveland was doing to start off the year, and then being able to move that contract because of the positive value of it and because of the way that the team started to look, to go get a guy like Caris LeVert who truly almost is your ideal mold for the type of guy that you want next to Darius Garland. Now he's a little bit older than some of the guys on this team. Not quite as old as Kevin Love comparatively, but he isn't, even Jared Allen is multiple years younger than him at this point. But both those guys coming from the Nets is kind of funny to think about, right? Because you think about that Nets team that made the playoffs, that win against the Sixers in the playoffs with, D'Angelo Russell, Spencer Dinwiddie, Caris LeVert, Jared Allen, all those guys on different teams now. And funnily enough, the one All-Star out of them is probably the guy that gets talked about the least. Just because he's not the best player in his team anymore, and he plays in Minnesota. But somehow the Cleveland Cavaliers have made themselves kind of the talk of the league this year, right? With their defensive ability between rookie Evan Mobley and absolutely phenomenal shot blocker Jared Allen. I mean, I think people didn't quite realize how good Jared Allen was before this season because he was looked at, just kind of as one of those other, modern run and dunk block shots, big guys, kind of like a Clint Capella, just not as good, right? Is kind of how he was looked at. But God, is he good. This is a guy I think flashed a lot of potential in Brooklyn. And so the fact that the Cavs were able to get him for seemingly nothing, if they even did trade anything other than cash for him, to start off the year is wild. Because it's a guy that just made the All-Star team this year. He's going to be there for the long term in Cleveland, to have that defensive monster of him and Mobley down low. But he's a guy that's like blocked star players throughout the start of his career. And yeah, the more you go up for blocks, the more you get dunked on. He's got dunked on by plenty of star players too. But like, he earned, what he had, where he'd been at so far in the league. And I think he's probably one of the biggest regrets of the Rockets in, the whole James Harden deal and everything like that. Not getting a guy like Jarrett Allen, because now you see Jarrett Allen and Caris LeVert both ending up back on the same team here with Cleveland. And what is Cleveland? A playoff team now. So maybe getting those guys instead of getting Oladipo not only gives the Rockets all those picks that they received from Brooklyn, but also potentially gives them a playoff contender or a competent team, a team that puts people's butts in the seat. But at this point, the Rockets are fighting for another number 1 overall pick, and maybe that's better. I'm not sure, but I think Jarrett Allen is definitely a guy that's probably missed by that and looked at as a failure to not have kept him in that trade with James, or to trade away James Harden with the Brooklyn Nets. Now we have since seen James Harden move to the Philadelphia 76ers, and I will have a video about that coming up here in the next couple of days. And maybe why they might not be as good as you think they're going to be. Now I'll get into that in its own video specifically. But yeah, back to this Cleveland Cavaliers team. Jarrett Allen, big force down below. Evan Mobley, probably at this point a lock for Rookie of the Year. Duarte had his little stint at the start of the year where he was kind of making stuff happen. And we've seen Giddey kind of come to a rise. I think 3 straight triple doubles now at the recording of this video, and I think he's the first person since Oscar Robertson to do that as a rookie. So shout out to him. I know I have a buddy that really likes Josh Giddey. I think he'll be all right. But I think Mobley is definitely going to be a generational guy. We've seen Cade kind of come alive, and Jalen Green's had his struggles so far. And then Kuminga's kind of, his playing time's all over the place. Sometimes for the Warriors, but we've seen flashes out of him. But regardless, by far and away, definitely Rookie of the Year for Evan Mobley. 2 All-Stars, so that's, really you can call that 3 awards for this team. We've seen Okoro trying to improve his game. We'll see kind of how that goes on for the future for them. But being able to bring in a guy like Caris LeVert is exactly what this team needed at the trade deadline. It was a trade that almost every NBA fan was mocking for this team to make, because we all knew, or we all felt like they had to trade that Ricky Rubio contract to get the most out of this year, because I think, when at least I watched the Through the Wire podcast, and obviously Pierre over there on that podcast, shout out to that podcast and shout out to them. But he's a Knicks fan, and when you look at a team like the Knicks that, was the Cinderella story last year, I think personally, I feel like we all knew they weren't going to improve. Maybe Knicks fans didn't. Knicks fans can be a bit delusional. But I think we all knew they weren't going to improve on that, and they probably weren't even going to reach the height that they did last year of just being able to lose to the Atlanta Hawks. But I don't think we all expected them to drop off to the point that they did, right? Maybe, I want to say they were like the 5th seed last year, or the 4th seed. Yeah, I think they were 4th seed because they had home court in the first round versus Trae Young, I believe. But, I don't think we expected them to have home court again. I think, but we expected them to be like a 6, 7, 8 seed or something like that. Make the playoffs, do their thing. Not the most talented roster, but, coached by Thibodeau. We've seen them regress a lot. So Cleveland is like, okay, yeah, this team's super young, and yeah, we should be back. And more than likely, I think, Cleveland's roster is built in a way that it should be back, and it more than likely will be back over a team like the Knicks, where the Knicks literally were, at this point, you look back at it now, and they were there 90% on hustle and on the fact that people forgot Julius Randle's actually a decent player when you forget about him. We saw him do the same thing in New Orleans. We saw him kind of pop off when Anthony Davis the year after DeMarcus Cousins left and was injured and he went to the Warriors and everything like that. And when Anthony Davis was wanting out, we saw Julius Randle become their number one option, and he was able to do virtually the same thing that he did in New York, except for the winning, because again, he didn't have some of those defenders, some of those shooters, and some of that perfect situation around him to get that winning. And obviously a lot of that due to Thibodeau, but he goes on to win Most Improved, and I still think that team's formula wasn't. Yes, the hustle and everything like that was replicable, but the star players' play wasn't as replicable as you see in Cleveland, where you see, Jared Allen's been doing what he's doing for years, maybe not quite to the level he's doing it at this year, but he's been able to do it exactly this for years. Evan Mobley coming into the league, he was a guy that could cover, when I was watching March Madness, this guy covered the whole court with the length of his body. Like, I knew he was going to be an elite defender. We didn't know how his offensive game was going to work for the NBA. And it was, is his frame going to matter too much, right? But his frame clearly hasn't mattered. And yeah, his offensive game is really not polished at all. It's if you think Evan Mobley is going to come out there and hit you for a step back, even mid-range or anything like that, or cross you up or anything, no, he's going to get his little layup, he's going to get his little dunk, and that's exactly fine. He doesn't have to be this crazy offensive player, especially at this point in his career, because you've got perimeter creation like Darius Garland and stuff like that, that is able to kind of make up for that and get him in spaces where he can succeed with the ball without having, that individual creation ability, and bringing in Caris LeVert only makes that better for this team. Because Caris LeVert can get his individual shots. He's a guy that he can isolate. He can get his own shots. But also he's not an awful playmaker. And, for guys like Jared Allen, for guys like Evan Mobley, it helps to have more guys that can create offense on the court, because it gets the ball to those guys where they are a little bit more comfortable and don't have to do as much with it, and can kind of just focus on scoring that ball when they get it on a mismatch or on an inside look, rather than trying to do something fancy, which maybe they aren't quite at the level of like a guy like Kevin Love, who has been scoring at a decent level in the league for a decade plus now, right? This is a veteran off their bench, and I think a lot of people are looking at Kevin Love and kind of laughing because of some of the comments he made last year, but also maybe that lit a fire under some of these guys in the offseason, and maybe that's why we saw Darius Garland come into this year and look like a most improved player of the year candidate. I think at this point in the year, it's, I would say, again, unanimously probably Ja Morant. I have some videos on him on the channel if you guys want to go check that out, and kind of on some more of my thoughts on that. But yeah, Darius Garland threw himself in that conversation because he's jumped to being Darius Garland. I think coming to the league, I guess, to back it up, a lot of question marks, right? Played like 6 games in college. What, he tore his like ACL or MCL or Achilles or something, and so he was coming in injured, very little film. Hadn't played, like I said, very little film, hadn't played much since like high school, didn't have an outstanding rookie year, and we had seen the Cleveland Cavaliers, he was like the guy that was traded up for, right? People were trying to move up in that draft to get guards. Garland was the guy traded up for and taken by Cleveland, because I believe they traded up, it was like the Suns, the Timberwolves, and the Cavs, they were all making moves that draft, whatever. But he gets taken to Cleveland, doesn't have exactly the rookie year you were hoping, and we see them now having a small backcourt of like a 6-foot guard in Garland, who will never be as a shooting guard, right? His playmaking ability is too good to not have him at that point guard position, having the ball in his hands, or at least his playmaking potential at that point in his rookie season. And that next to a guy that had no playmaking potential in Colin Sexton, but was able to just put the ball in the basket. And I think his injury, now obviously I wish injury on nobody. Sometimes it helps people and sometimes it hurts people, but at the end of the day, you don't ever want to see a person get hurt or in pain. That's wrong to wish injury on somebody like that. I think, as sports fans, we can get wrapped up in that. And like Toronto, when Kevin Durant goes down with an injury in the finals versus Toronto, the reason they cheered is because they knew that meant that, wow, we have a shot to actually win this. But you never should cheer or be happy for a sports player, for a person's, not a sports player, because these are people, for a person's injury or a person's downfall for your own benefit, or even for your own secondhand benefit, like that would be for Raptors. And I think most fans, looking back on it, those Raptors fans that did cheer for stuff like that, like they probably don't look back as that as one of their fondest moments, would be my guess. But yeah, these people are human, and Darius Garland, Colin Sexton getting injured might have been a blessing in disguise for this team this year, because it allowed Darius Garland to take that step forward and have to be, with the mentorship of Ricky Rubio and everything like that, because we're able to see him with a different type of guard out there on the court. He was able to take that lead and become the guy that he needed to be, and that they hoped that he could be, and become that all-star. I think we saw his playmaking ability drastically improve, and then takes center stage within their offense, and due to some of the new additions, especially down low, and the difference in play style from last year, where you go from having a front court that consists of, did they have Andre Drummond last year? They might have had Andre Drummond last year, or that might have been 2 years ago. I don't know. Their front court was Kevin Love and somebody. To this year it being Jared Allen, a solidified shot blocker, and Evan Mobley, a standout defensive player coming into the league. You built an identity of a grit, super strong defensive team that's gonna, let Garland run the offense and kind of, pick and roll, all that. And Garland became a master of the pick and roll with, when he was given the players to suit it. And now I think he's unlocked the potential where this isn't the first All-Star game that Darius Garland's going to make. And that's why I think Cleveland will be back where they are this year. Or maybe, like a 6 seed next year. Or like a 5 seed. A little lower than where they are right now, because we'll probably see some more health next year. And I assume protocols will lessen up, continued as we continue to stretch farther away from the beginning of all this just pandemic stuff and all that. And so that'll probably help with, standings making a little bit more sense next year. And yeah, we'll probably see Cleveland drop a little bit in the standings. Not only just due to, teams kind of figuring them out a little bit more and stuff like that, but also just because it's hard to replicate Cinderella type years. You don't see it happen. You don't see a team in March Madness that's, a 8 seed or something like that go to the Final Four and then, do it 3 or 4 years in a row as a Cinderella, right? You don't see that happen a lot. Cinderella stories are typically 1 year. Yeah, they're typically a little bit better for the next couple years than you expected them to be and stuff like that, but they aren't this outrageous, they don't become an outrageous juggernaut out of nowhere. So yes, I think Cleveland will be back in the playoffs next year. I think this team picking up Karis LeVert was the smartest thing they could have done, because yes, Darius Garland became such a master of the pick and roll and became such a master of getting his teammates involved and being able to create his own shot this year, that he was able to become an all-star. But other than him at that perimeter creation with Colin Sexton out, and though I said that was like a blessing in disguise for being able to bring this team together and rise them back into a relevant roster within the league, they had no other perimeter creation. Dylan Windler, Isaac Okoro, a Ricky Rubio on the bench, none of that was going to get it done. We saw them go out and trade after Rubio was injured and done for the season. We saw them go out and trade for Rajon Rondo, kind of that similar type of thing, but obviously, Rondo has a tendency to, he's one of the most brilliant basketball minds of all time, but he has a tendency to sometimes clash with younger players just because of his, probably in part because of his brilliance of the game, but also he's a guy that just wants to win at the end of the day. And so we saw them make that move. It was questioned by some people. I think to say that Rondo's a locker room cancer would be just a false statement at this point, because he's been able to be on winning teams. But to say that he's got, maybe a different mentality than a lot of guys, I think is fair, right? It's kind of like a Jimmy Butler. Like, I don't think any of us would consider Jimmy Butler a locker room cancer. But with the Timberwolves, when he was there, it looked like either it was him or that whole roster was our locker room cancer. But then we saw him go to the Heat and become, a top player in the league, and, a guy that could carry his team to the finals, and there went all that locker room cancer, locker room problem talk. And yeah, Rajon Rondo has never carried a team to the finals or whatever on his back. I mean, I don't know, maybe you could say the Big Three Celtics. No, I'm kidding. But, you could, like Rajon Rondo kind of to fill that similar role of what Ricky Rubio provided, but you didn't have, like, Rajon Rondo's not going to go out there and create a step back shot for himself. Yeah, he's going to create a little bit for others, but not at the level that he used to. And at this point, he's probably closer to becoming a coach than he is to being an NBA player. And he's an active NBA player. So I think that says enough for it there. But yeah, you know, honestly, really just wanted to make this video because there's a lot to talk about for this team. Shout out to Cleveland and everything like that for being able to host the All-Star game and have 2 All-Stars representing you. Funnily enough, both on Team LeBron. So you've got LeBron with your 2 All-Stars in Cleveland. Probably couldn't be a better year for Cleveland Cavaliers fans, honestly. And there was just so much to talk about for this team that I hadn't gotten to. I really wanted to make a video over the last couple weeks. Honestly, I was just kind of super lazy, got burnt out a little bit, and so that's why we didn't see one. And I know you guys saw a different style video for the last couple of videos, which I didn't really get feedback on the style, but it seemed that you guys were liking those videos, just based on like the view counts and you know, the interactions and comments and stuff like that I was seeing. So I will, you know, try to do some more of that stuff. Those take a lot longer to kind of put together. So that's a little bit more difficult. And then both of those videos actually got copyrighted. The Andrew Wiggins video is like blocked in some countries or something like that for I don't know what clip I used. But it's super hard. Even like that Andrew Wiggins video, I tried to hone in and really focus on trying to not let it be copyright so that you know, obviously I'm not making any money at this point, but in the future or whatever, it wouldn't hinder my channel or potentially bring about like a copyright strike or something like that is really what I'd be worried about. So really it's going to be, maybe we'll see some more of those videos kind of come back once I can really figure that out. But for now, we're going to kind of stick with our normal style of 2K gameplay in the background and just kind of me, I guess, rambling with that going on. But yeah, I figured I'd give you a quick update at the end of this video since I haven't uploaded in like, well, let's see, at this point, it's probably like 16 days. If I take a look, it is, 17. We're going on 17 days. So yeah, I haven't uploaded in a while. Figured I'd let you guys know. Obviously, I've appreciated the support on the channel, and we actually have a new top 3 video. The Zion Williamson video has pretty much been carrying the channel for the past like 2 weeks. So I'm sure if you've seen my channel at all, you've seen that video as it now moves to over 700 views, to be our 4th video over 700 views, and now our 3rd highest viewed video of all time. So I appreciate the guys' support on that one, and everybody's feedback on all of the recent videos. And yeah, that's gonna be it from me. Make sure you guys stay tuned tomorrow or the next day, one of the two, for that Philadelphia 76ers video that will be coming out. And yeah,